Step out of the vehicle, license and registration.
What violation did I commit?
Stolen vehicle report. Out of the car.
I'm a federal judge. These are my credentials.
I don't care who you are. Get out now.
I have federal judicial immunity. This stop is unlawful.
Not in my county, you don't.
Judge Irene Jacobs was 2 miles from home when Sheriff John Neal's patrol lights appeared behind her Mercedes on a clear Tuesday afternoon in November. She hadn't been speeding, hadn't run any lights, hadn't violated a single traffic law. She was a federal judge with lifetime appointment, presiding over organized crime cases that had dismantled criminal enterprises across 3 states. The briefcase on her passenger seat contained sealed RICO investigation files, classified documents marked with federal security designations, and evidence that had taken the Department of Justice 18 months to compile. What Sheriff Neal didn't know was that 4 cameras were recording everything he was about to do. That the woman he was pulling over could issue federal warrants that froze assets across international borders. That the classified documents he was about to photograph without authorization included an ongoing investigation into Texas law enforcement corruption. And that buried in those files, on page 47 of a document he would photograph with his personal cell phone, was his own name typed in legal formatting. Sheriff John Neal, Montgomery County, subject of federal investigation into unauthorized database access and sale of confidential information. Before we continue, hit that subscribe button and drop a like. Let me know in the comments, what city or country are you watching from? What Sheriff John Neal didn't know was that Judge Jacobs had spent 8 years as a federal prosecutor with a 94% conviction rate on public corruption cases before her appointment to the bench. That she had been trained by her uncle, a retired FBI agent, on exactly how to document unlawful stops. Stay calm, announce every movement, let officers incriminate themselves. That her dashboard camera had activated automatically the moment she pulled over, recording everything in high definition. That the gas station where Neal had ordered her to stop had security cameras covering the parking lot from 2 different angles. That a construction worker sitting in his truck across the street had pulled out his phone to record when he saw the aggressive stop, and that a traffic camera at the intersection behind them was capturing the entire scene with timestamps synchronized to the second. 4 cameras, 4 different angles, every word documented, every action preserved, every constitutional violation recorded with precision that would survive any legal challenge. Irene Jacobs grew up in Austin, Texas. Her father was a high school principal. Her mother worked as a nurse at Dell Children's Medical Center. Her uncle, Marcus Jacobs, spent 28 years as an FBI agent specializing in civil rights violations and public corruption cases. When Irene was 17, Uncle Marcus gave her advice that would define her career and save her life 25 years later. If you're ever stopped by police, he said, stay calm, keep your hands visible, announce every movement before you make it. State clearly that you don't consent to searches. Ask if you're being detained and what crime they suspect. Document everything. And Irene, let them talk. The more they talk, the more evidence they create. Irene graduated from the University of Texas School of Law in 2005. She clerked for the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, then joined the U.S. Attorney's Office as a federal prosecutor. She specialized in public corruption, police officers taking bribes, elected officials selling votes, judges fixing cases. Her conviction rate was 94%. She never lost a case involving law enforcement corruption. In 2020, at age 38, President Trump nominated her to the federal bench. She was confirmed by the Senate after hearing so thorough they examined every case she'd ever prosecuted, every ruling she'd ever made as a magistrate, every speech she'd ever given. She took her oath as a United States District Judge for the Southern District of Texas in January 2021. By November 2024, Judge Jacobs had presided over 340 cases. She had sentenced organized crime figures to decades in federal prison. She had issued warrants that shut down international money laundering operations. She had sealed indictments that were used to dismantle criminal enterprises operating across multiple states. On Tuesday, November 19th, 2024, she left the federal courthouse in Houston at 3:30 p.m. She was driving her personal vehicle, a dark metallic blue Mercedes-Benz E-Class she had purchased with careful savings from her federal salary. On the passenger seat sat her leather briefcase containing 3 sealed case files she was reviewing at home that evening. Each file was marked classified in red letters. Each file was part of an ongoing RICO investigation into organized crime operations with ties to public corruption. One of those files, a 200-page DOJ investigation into Texas law enforcement database abuse, contained evidence the Department of Justice had been compiling for 18 months. It documented unauthorized access to confidential databases. It traced payments through banking systems, and on page 47, in a section Judge Jacobs had not yet reviewed in detail, appeared a name, Sheriff John Neal, Montgomery County. At 3:42 p.m., Judge Jacobs stopped at a Shell gas station 2 miles from her home. She needed to fill her tank before the evening. She pulled into the parking lot away from the pumps and was reaching for her purse when she saw the flashing lights in her rearview mirror. Sheriff John Neal of Montgomery County had been patrolling Highway 105 when he saw the Mercedes. Dark metallic blue, current year model, tinted windows, driven by a black woman in professional attire. His instincts, shaped by 8 years of operating on assumptions rather than evidence, told him something was wrong. He activated his lights and followed the Mercedes into the gas station parking lot. Judge Jacobs saw the patrol vehicle and felt her training activate. She placed both hands on the steering wheel at 10 and 2. Her dashboard camera activated automatically, a security feature all federal judges were advised to install. She waited. Sheriff Neal approached the driver's side with body language that spoke of authority, assumed rather than earned. His hand hovered near his service weapon. His body camera was recording, uploading footage automatically to the department server. "Step out of the vehicle," Neal said. "License and registration." Judge Jacobs kept her hands visible. "Officer, what violation did I commit?" Neal's jaw tightened. "Stolen vehicle report. Out of the car." Judge Jacobs reached slowly for her purse, announcing the movement clearly. "I'm reaching for my credentials." She pulled out her federal judicial identification, black leather wallet with the gold seal of the United States District Court embossed on the front. She extended it through the window. "I'm Judge Irene Jacobs, United States District Court, Southern District of Texas. These are my federal credentials. My vehicle registration is current, and this Mercedes is registered in my name." Neal examined the credentials for approximately 4 seconds. His expression showed skepticism, dismissal, hostility. "I don't care who you are. Get out now." Judge Jacobs spoke clearly, ensuring the words would be captured by every microphone recording the scene. "I have federal judicial immunity. This stop is unlawful. There was no traffic violation, and you have not articulated reasonable suspicion of any crime." Neal's face flushed. "Not in my county, you don't." He reached for the door handle. Judge Jacobs had no choice. She opened the door slowly, stepped out with her hands visible, and stood beside her Mercedes. Across the parking lot, construction worker David Torres sat in his truck eating lunch. He saw the aggressive stop, saw the sheriff's hostile posture, saw the woman in professional attire being ordered from her vehicle. Something felt wrong. He pulled out his phone and started recording. At the gas pumps, 2 customers glanced over. The gas station security cameras captured everything from 2 different angles. The traffic camera at the intersection behind them recorded with timestamps accurate to the second. 4 cameras, 4 angles, all recording. "I'm going to search your vehicle," Neal said. Judge Jacobs stood perfectly still, but her voice carried absolute authority. "I do not consent to any search. You have no probable cause. You have not articulated any reasonable suspicion. I am explicitly denying consent." Neal ignored her completely. He opened the driver's door and looked inside. On the passenger seat sat the leather briefcase. Black calfskin with the federal court seal embossed in gold. Beside it lay sealed manila folders marked in bold red letters. Classified. Federal court. Use only. "What's in the briefcase?" Neal demanded. "Sealed federal court documents. Opening them without proper authorization constitutes a federal crime under Title 18 of the United States Code. I am ordering you as a federal judge to cease this search immediately." Neal pulled the briefcase from the vehicle. The leather was heavy, expensive, official. He forced the lock. The mechanism broke. Inside were 3 thick case files, each bearing security classifications stamped in red ink. One file, marked with the highest classification level, pertained to an ongoing RICO investigation into organized crime with public corruption elements. Another contained sealed witness testimony under federal protection programs. The third was a DOJ investigation into Texas law enforcement database abuse and sale of confidential information, a file Judge Jacobs had been assigned to review but had not yet examined in detail. Neil pulled out his personal cell phone and began photographing pages. The camera shutter sound clicked repeatedly. Each photograph created time-stamped metadata. Each image automatically uploaded to his personal cloud storage. Each action was being captured by 4 cameras from 4 different angles. You are photographing classified federal documents without authorization, Judge Jacobs stated clearly. This is a federal crime. Every photograph you're taking is being documented. Neil photographed 70 pages. He moved methodically through the files, capturing detailed images of case information, witness identities, federal investigation protocols, and evidence compiled over 18 months. On page 47 of the DOJ database investigation file, a name appeared in precise legal formatting: Sheriff John Neal, Montgomery County. Subject of investigation: unauthorized access to law enforcement databases, sale of confidential information to private entities, systematic pattern of discriminatory enforcement. Neil had just photographed evidence of the federal investigation into his own criminal activities, with metadata showing exact timestamps, with cloud backups creating permanent records, with 4 cameras capturing every moment. What Neil didn't know, what he couldn't have known, was that he hadn't profiled a random black woman. He had profiled the federal judge who would have eventually presided over his criminal trial, and he had just handed her irrefutable evidence of federal obstruction to add to the charges that would end his career and his freedom. At 3:58 p.m., Judge Jacobs was handcuffed and placed in the back of Neil's patrol vehicle. The metal bit into her wrists. The plastic seat was hard and uncomfortable. Her mind was already 3 steps ahead, cataloging every detail with prosecutorial precision. Time: 3:58 p.m. Location: Shell gas station, Highway 105, 2 miles from home. Witnesses: at least 5 civilians within visual range. Construction worker recording on phone. Gas station employees visible through windows. Evidence: 4 cameras from 4 angles, 70 photographs with metadata, verbal statements captured on audio. At the federal courthouse in Houston, Judicial Assistant Robert Chen checked his watch. 4:02 p.m. Judge Jacobs' mandatory security check-in had been scheduled for precisely 4 p.m. He tried her cell phone. The call went directly to voicemail. Chen had worked for federal judges for 12 years. Judge Jacobs was known throughout the Southern District for reliability that bordered on obsessive. She had never, not once in 4 years, missed a scheduled security check-in without prior notification. He waited 2 minutes and tried again. 4:04 p.m. Voicemail. At 4:05 p.m., Chen activated the emergency protocol. The call went to Deputy U.S. Marshal Angela Reeves, who handled judicial security for the district. Marshal Reeves understood immediately that this wasn't administrative oversight. Federal judges operated under specific security protocols because their decisions affected powerful interests. When a federal judge missed a check-in, the response was immediate and comprehensive. Reeves accessed the tracking system for court-issued devices. Judge Jacobs' phone had last pinged a cell tower at the Shell gas station on Highway 105 at 3:42 p.m. No movement since. U.S. Marshal Service teams deployed immediately. 3 vehicles, 8 agents, full emergency protocol. They arrived at the gas station at 4:23 p.m. Judge Jacobs' Mercedes sat in space B4, exactly where the tracking data indicated. Driver's door closed, vehicle locked. No sign of the judge. Marshal Reeves approached the gas station manager and requested immediate access to security footage. Federal emergency, missing federal judge. The footage showed everything. 3:42 p.m., Mercedes pulls into parking lot. Professional black woman driving. 3:44 p.m., sheriff's patrol vehicle pulls in behind, lights flashing. 3:45 p.m., sheriff approaches aggressively. Woman presents credentials through window. 3:48 p.m., sheriff orders woman from vehicle. She complies. 3:52. p.m., sheriff forces open briefcase despite woman's visible objections. 3:52 to 3:59 p.m., sheriff photographs documents with personal phone. 4:01 p.m., woman handcuffed and placed in patrol vehicle. 4:03 p.m., patrol vehicle departs. Reeves called Montgomery County Sheriff's Department directly. The desk sergeant confirmed they had someone matching that description in custody, brought in approximately 20 minutes earlier, currently in holding, charges pending. Reeves's voice transformed completely. You have a United States District Judge in custody. Federal judicial credentials were presented and ignored. Classified national security documents were accessed without authorization. This is now a federal incident. Do not process her. Do not move her. Do not speak to her. Federal agents are en route. The sergeant's tone shifted from routine to barely controlled panic. Captain Vincent Drake reached the holding area within minutes. Judge Jacobs sat on the concrete bench, suit jacket folded beside her, posture upright despite the circumstances. Her expression was calm, professional, and absolutely controlled. Drake began to speak. Judge Jacobs, I am so... She interrupted. Where are the documents that Sheriff Neal photographed from my briefcase? Drake checked the evidence log. Briefcase contents photographed by Sheriff Neal for evidence purposes. 70 pages. All marked classified, all time-stamped. All automatically uploaded to personal cloud storage before the phone was secured. Were any of those documents marked as classified? Judge Jacobs asked. Drake read the log with growing horror. Yes, multiple files, multiple classifications. How many photographs were uploaded to cloud storage before you secured the phone? Drake's voice came out barely above a whisper. All of them. 70 images, automatic backup. Judge Jacobs stood. Sheriff Neal has committed multiple federal crimes, unauthorized access to classified information, obstruction of federal judicial proceedings, violation of sealed federal court documents. Each violation carries mandatory minimum sentences. She paused. Among those 70 pages was an ongoing DOJ investigation into Texas law enforcement database abuse. Sheriff Neal's name appears in that investigation. He just photographed evidence from a federal investigation into his own criminal activities. With metadata, with cloud backups, with 4 cameras capturing everything. Drake's face went pale. Judge Jacobs continued in the same measured tone. He didn't profile a random black woman. He profiled the federal judge who would have presided over his trial. And he created irrefutable evidence of federal obstruction. Judge Jacobs was released at 4:35 p.m. Federal agents had secured every phone, every camera, every piece of evidence. She drove directly to the federal courthouse and began making calls. Chief Judge Patricia Moreno took her call immediately. Full federal investigation mandatory, resources unlimited, consequences maximum. Department of Justice Civil Rights Division, investigation team deployment within hours. National Security Division notified due to classified document breach. By 6 p.m., federal investigators executed simultaneous search warrants. Every electronic device was seized from Neal and 4 other deputies who preliminary analysis had identified. Phones, computers, tablets, personal and departmental servers. Everything that could contain evidence. The forensic examination took 10 weeks. What they found exceeded expectations. 512 traffic stops by Neal over 8 years. 456 involved minority drivers. Montgomery County was 68% white, according to census data. The statistical probability of achieving an 89% minority stop rate without intentional targeting was 0.003%. 428 unauthorized database queries over the same period. Celebrities, politicians, business executives, private citizens. Information sold to 19 clients, including private investigators, bail bondsmen, and tabloid journalists. $180,000 in traceable payments through banking records, text messages spanning 6 years, racial slurs documented in digital permanence, coordination with other deputies, celebration of arrest quotas, mockery of minority drivers. The evidence was overwhelming. The documentation was irrefutable. The federal grand jury convened 8 months after the gas station incident. The indictment was 43 pages long, detailing 47 separate federal counts. The trial began in September 2025. Prosecution presented their case over 3 weeks. Video evidence from 4 cameras synchronized to show the same events. Forensic analysis of the 70 photographs with metadata. Banking records tracing $180,000 in payments. Database log showing 428 unauthorized queries. Statistical analysis proving discriminatory targeting. Text messages with racial language. Judge Jacobs testified for 5 hours. She described presenting federal credentials and watching Neal dismiss them. She described explicitly denying consent to search and hearing that denial ignored. She described classified documents being photographed despite clear warnings. The defense attempted to suggest she had been uncooperative. Her response was devastating. I answered every question. I complied with every lawful order. I presented valid federal credentials. I explained why the search was unlawful. My cooperation was total within constitutional bounds. 37 other victims testified. A woman who lost custody of children after a fabricated arrest. An elderly man hospitalized after being thrown down during a pretextual stop. A young business owner whose company failed after bogus charges destroyed his reputation. The jury deliberated 6 hours. Guilty on all 47 counts. Neal sat without visible emotion. Sentencing came 6 weeks later. Judge Michael Russo addressed each aggravating factor. Neal had betrayed fundamental trust. He had weaponized authority against people he'd sworn to protect. He had racially profiled hundreds of citizens. He had sold confidential information for profit. And he had committed crimes against the judicial system itself. The sentence: 52 years in federal prison, no parole. Neal would be 101 years old at release. All pension benefits revoked. Law enforcement certification permanently stripped. Appeals denied at every level. The civil lawsuit proceeded in parallel. Jacobs versus Montgomery County Sheriff's Department. The county offered $4 million with confidentiality. Judge Jacobs refused. She demanded public trial and institutional accountability. The verdict: $28 million total, $10 million compensatory, $18 million punitive. Largest civil rights verdict in Texas history. Judge Jacobs held a press conference 3 weeks later. She stood at a podium bearing the seal of the United States District Court and announced that every dollar of the settlement would be donated to organizations working to prevent what had happened to her. $10 million to the National Police Accountability Project. $8 million to the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. $6 million to the Innocence Project. $4 million to Texas Community Legal Aid Organizations. The entire settlement. Not a dollar kept. All channeled into systemic reform. The Foundation for Judicial Accountability was established using the settlement funds. Its mission: funding appeals for wrongful convictions, providing legal aid to those unable to afford representation, and developing training programs for law enforcement. Over 3 years, the foundation freed 31 wrongfully convicted individuals. It provided representation to over 600 defendants. Model legislation developed by the foundation was adopted by 7 states. The federal consent decree imposed on Montgomery County was comprehensive. 10 years of DOJ monitoring, independent civilian oversight board with subpoena power, mandatory body cameras with footage stored by third parties, bias training redesigned by civil rights experts, early intervention systems with automatic triggers, all stop data tracked and published quarterly by demographics. As of March 2026, John Neal is serving his sentence at FC Juan Beaumont, Texas. He will be 101 years old if he survives to release. His name is used in police academies nationwide as an example of what happens when officers let bias override the law. Judge Irene Jacobs continues serving on the federal bench. She testified before Congress on protecting judicial independence. Her foundation has freed 31 people and provided legal aid to hundreds more. The case is taught in law schools across the country. The lesson was expensive. The lesson was public. The lesson was permanent. Federal judicial immunity exists everywhere, not just in counties where sheriffs choose to recognize it. 4 cameras documented everything because one federal judge had been trained to protect herself and knew that evidence properly documented could hold power accountable. And one sheriff's decision to profile a black woman based on the car she drove resulted in 52 years in prison, $28 million in damages funding the very organizations working to end police corruption, and a case study that will be referenced for generations. If you believe no one should be above the law and everyone deserves constitutional protection regardless of race, share this story. What reforms do you think prevent officers from dismissing legitimate federal credentials? Drop your answer in the comments. And if this reminded you that documentation, calm authority, and institutional support can dismantle corruption, subscribe. We're not stopping until every officer understands that not in my county isn't a defense against federal law.